Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the GRIPS Forum. My name is Narushige Michishita. I teach International Security Affairs at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, in Tokyo. I'll be serving as your host today. Ukraine is struggling. The country is running short of ammunition and air defense assets. Russia is on the offensive. Despite the large number of casualties and attrition it has been suffering. That said, Ukraine has been successfully fending off cyber attacks from Russia since the war began in February 2022. What has made it possible for Ukraine to have been successful on the cybersecurity front? What kind of effort do the government and the industry in Ukraine make, and what kind of support does the country receive from overseas? And what are the implications of Ukraine's experience for the countries in the Indo-Pacific region? Today, we have invited Ms. Mihoko Matsubara, Chief Cybersecurity Strategist of the NTT Corporation, to answer those questions. Before joining NTT, Ms. Matsubara worked for the Japan Ministry of Defense, studied at the Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies, or SAIS, in Washington, D.C., and worked as a Vice President and Public Sector Chief Security Officer for the Asia-Pacific region at Palo Alto Networks. She has published a book on cybersecurity in 2019, which won the Okawa Foundation for Information and Telecommunications Book Award, and published her second book entitled Ukraine's Cyber War in August last year, which won the Digital Policy Forum Award recently. I will ask Ms. Matsubara to speak for about 40 minutes, invite GRIPS faculty and students to offer comments and ask questions, and then open the floor for Q&A and discussion after that. The presentation and discussion in this session will be on the record. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Matsubara.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for your interest in cybersecurity. And I really appreciate it, because everybody in this room and also outside the room uses IT every single day for your academic work, business activities, and governmental missions. It means that everybody is responsible for cybersecurity, because IT and IT's security or cybersecurity is a foundation of our daily lives, business activities, and also national security. Today, I'd like to focus on security lessons to learn from Ukraine. Because cybersecurity is related to IT, and IT is reliant on physical infrastructure. So that is why cybersecurity and physical security are closely intertwined. So that is why I named the title of my talk today, Security Lessons, rather than just cybersecurity lessons. My talk today has 3 pillars. The first one is about Ukraine. The second one is about potential conflict or crisis in Taiwan and Japan. And finally, I'd like to talk about next steps to take for Japan and the rest of the world. So before getting into security lessons to learn from Ukraine, I'd like to give you some background knowledge. I understand that people here today in this room in person and also listening to my talk online are not necessarily cybersecurity professionals. So there are basically two main types of cyber attacks to be used in war or conflict: cyber espionage and disruptions or distractions. So cyber espionage means that you use cyber attacks to collect intelligence. Of course, even now, at this moment, cyber espionage is going on to collect intellectual property information or national security related sensitive intelligence. But if your country is in survival mode, it is even more crucial to collect intelligence from multiple sources to make timely decisions. And as I said in the beginning of my talk, everything is connected these days. So cyber attacks become even more valuable tools to collect intelligence in wartime. And the second type of cyber attack, disruptions or distractions, can be achieved by multiple means. The first one would include DDoS attacks to take down online services or websites. It is annoying, for sure, but it doesn't necessarily mean to degrade your national power. But when it comes to wiper, it is different. So wipe means to take out something from somewhere. And if you use wiper malware, you can wipe out data indispensable to conduct your business operations. So if your systems are infected with wiper malware, your business continuity is disrupted. And through supply chain, not only your own organization, but also other business sectors or organizations connected to your supply chain will be also disrupted. So that is why wiper cyber attacks means a lot to make more difference in conflict or wartime. And nowadays, you see lots of news articles or TV news about ransomware attacks to make money. But sometimes in wartime or in conflict, ransomware attacks are used as part of wiper attack. This is not to make money, but to paralyze your business operations and also to disrupt your supply chain. And I'd like to talk more about disruptions or distractions in wartime. And before Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, cybersecurity professionals had expected Russia would certainly launch massive disruptive cyber attacks on Ukrainian critical infrastructure facilities. It would include communication takedown, and also Russia would certainly launch disinformation campaigns. Why? Because we saw a similar attack during the first stage of the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And not only that, Russia successfully launched a cyber attacks to take down Ukrainian power grid in December 2015 and 2016. Please remember that the winter in Ukraine is freezingly cold. And if you cannot use electricity in winter, it can cause a huge risk to human lives. And after that, Russia also launched a massive large-scale wiper attack in June 2017. It seems that Russia's main targets are Ukrainian governmental agencies and also critical infrastructure companies such as underground trains and airports, the media and the financial institutions. But through the internet, the wiper actually spread to 65 countries in the world, and the total damage caused by this single cyber attack amounted almost 10 billion US dollars. So that is why that the cybersecurity professionals had real concerns that if Russia would launch a large-scale disruptive cyber attack, it would damage not only Ukrainian government, but also critical infrastructure companies, as well as our countries through that cyber attack. But it's been more than 2 years since the Russian aggression to Ukraine. Have we seen that kind of news articles over the last 2 years? We haven't. Why? Because something has changed since 2014. The Ukrainians had made their utmost efforts to enhance their cyber defenses over the last 9 years. So let's take a look at what kind of differences they made in terms of cyber defenses. So first of all, preparations was totally different compared to 2014 and 2022. According to the Financial Times, the US Army sent delegations consisting of US Army Cyber Command specialists and also American companies' professionals to Ukraine in October to November 2021. It means that a few months before the aggression. And in cooperation with the Ukrainian part, the Americans did investigations into the networks of Ukrainian companies. Because they had known and investigated the Russian cyber attackers' methods beforehand, and they had expected that the Russians would certainly embed wiper malware somewhere in the networks of Ukrainian critical infrastructure companies. And certainly they did. The Americans actually found wiper malware in the networks of Ukrainian railway systems. This kind of operation is called threat hunting. So you do not know where, how, and when the cyber attacks have been successfully breached into your network and where malware is sitting in your network. But you would expect it that somebody already implanted malware in your system. So you would hunt the foothold of the future cyber attacks in your network. and that is called threat hunting. And do you remember what you've seen the first 2 weeks of the Russian aggression on TV and also newspapers? How Ukrainian citizens evacuated their own country to their neighboring countries, and how the Ukrainian military and the government received humanitarian and military aid through Poland from partnering countries. How did they do that? Railway. So remember that if this wiper implanted by the Russians had never been discovered before the aggression, the adversary might have been able to activate it at the moment of their aggressions to cross tanks and missiles over the national border of Ukraine. In that case, the Ukrainian government would never been able to let Ukrainian citizens evacuate to their neighboring countries, or they would have never been able to receive humanitarian and military aid from different countries. So this preparation beforehand in collaboration with Americans made a huge difference to increase Ukrainian defense, not only in the cyberspace, but also in physical space. But I also would like to highlight the fact that the Ukrainians didn't just rely on international support. They actually played their own part too. So after the 2014, the annexation of Crimea, Ukraine learned cybersecurity lessons in a hard way. Every single year, they suffered from massive cyber attacks from Russia. And they learned that unless they make real efforts to enhance their cyber defenses, then they cannot protect their national security. So that is why not only the Ukrainian government, but also Ukrainian critical infrastructure companies, including power companies and the telecommunication companies, decided to increase their investment in cybersecurity. But they never got satisfied with their current level of cybersecurity. So in January 2022, 1 month before the aggression, the Ukrainians started to notice an increase in cyber attacks from Russia. At that point, Ukrainians saw that, okay, if Russians started to increase a number of cyber attacks on ourselves, it would mean that the Russians would be preparing for another level of larger scale of disruptive cyber attacks. So we should do something else. So that is why the Ukrainian government decided to form a team called Red Team. Red Team means that you actually launch cyber attacks on your own IT systems from adversary perspectives. Because if you only pray and do defense from defensive perspectives, you will suddenly miss something. So, but if you launch cyber attacks on your own system, you have better chances to find gaps in your defenses. And they certainly did. So until the last moment of aggressions, Ukrainians did every single effort to close the gap in their cyber defenses. So this kind of their own domestic efforts plus international collaboration from partnering countries, including Americans, made a huge difference to keep fighting into over 2 years into the war. So I recently published a co-authored op-ed from Nikkei Asia with Yuster Yu. And we found there are 3 lessons from the ongoing war in Ukraine. The first lesson is that cyber is an integral part of 21st century war or conflict, because everything is relied on the IT or the internet. So that is why to collect intelligence or to make disruptions or distractions, cyber attacks are really convenient. But there are also 2 other lessons Japanese and also the rest of the world should learn from Ukraine. How to be successful in cyber war or in real conflict. So Russia has been known for their cyber attacks since 1980s. So it has a long history of launching various cyber attacks, either cyber espionage or disruptive cyber attacks. But even though Russia has been known for high level of cyber attacks, the Ukrainians have been able to defend themselves from Russian cyber attacks. Why? Because Ukraine took 8 years to enhance its cyber defenses since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And they also learned lessons in a hard way from past cyber attacks, including the cyber attacks to take down their power grid in 2015 and 2016. So if you take cybersecurity seriously and take long time to improve your cybersecurity or cyber defenses, you can make a difference. And also, international collaboration or cooperation is crucial. Because nowadays, national borders do not make a difference to launch cyber attacks. You can launch cyber attacks across national borders. And sometimes damages of cyber attacks can spread over national borders or organizational borders. So that is why public-private partnerships and international collaborations are needed to share intelligence on cyber attacks and also cybersecurity best practices. And in the Ukrainian case, they have been able to obtain international collaboration from Americans, British, Estonians, Lithuanians, and other countries, and including the NATO and G7 and EU. But we should not forget that the Ukrainians have been also able to obtain support from major tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, CrowdStrike, and others. I'd like to explain why gaining collaboration from tech companies is so crucial. Because cyber domain is so unique compared to other domains like air, ground, or ocean. So air, ground, or ocean, or space, everything is consisting of natural items. However, the cyber domain, we tend to think that the cyber domain is so invisible, but that is not so true. Because cyber domain consisting of artificial items like laptops, smartphones, servers, cables, everything artificial. And that is dependent on technology provided and developed by the industry. And most of IT assets are developed, owned, and operated by the private sector. So that is why if you want to be successful in cybersecurity, you must and have to get support from the industry. And Ukrainians have been amazingly able to obtain free support from major tech companies over the last 2 years. So if the Japanese or the Taiwanese are really, truly concerned about potential conflict in the region, we also have to get support beforehand. But to do that, also, not only the government, but also the companies have to do a preparation beforehand. And I'd like to share an anecdote of Kyivstar, that is one of the largest telecommunication companies in Ukraine. And at least, I would not say every single Ukrainian companies, but at least some of the major Ukrainian companies did their part to prepare for potential invasion even before the February 2022. So Kyivstar leadership started to notice that the Russian military came together near the national border between Russia and Ukraine in January 2022. And I would assume that there are multiple options to take. So, because they are not military, they are just civilian company. And they didn't actually get any instruction from the Ukrainian government. So they had an option not to do anything particularly about it. But the Kyivstar leadership chose a totally different path because they learned from the past history. They had already expected that the Russian military came near the border would mean that aggression would happen in the near future. But also the leadership is aware that they are not national security experts. So they decided to consult with national security experts to review various scenarios and prioritize actions to take to be able to continue their business and services for their customers. Because they know that if telecommunication services go down, loved ones cannot be connected anymore. And it will be easier for those who to spread propaganda or disinformation campaigns because you have no way to dispel that kind of campaigns. And if you do not have communication services anymore, soldiers cannot fight anymore because soldiers cannot receive the order how to fight, where, and how. And so they actually spent millions of US dollars to establish extra communication channels. They created a database backups. They actually provided satellite phones for their employees to stay connected just in case. And they relocated crucial items or warehouses from the east to west because they expected that the western part of Ukraine would be safer compared to the eastern part of Ukraine if aggression happens. And this kind of preparation actually helped the Kyivstar to keep their business operations running even after the war started. Of course, they are just a private company. They cannot do missile defenses on their own. But still, because they made efforts to protect their telecommunication infrastructure. So that is why, even though that lots of telecommunication infrastructures and antennas and towers are destroyed by missile launches, but still they are able to continue their business operations and continue to deliver their telecommunication services to some extent. And in a wartime, the societal resilience is crucial, because war is not just about military versus military, because military also reliant on services and products provided by the industry, some from their own country, but also the others from other countries. And to keep fighting and to survive, and also to continue your sovereignty and to keep your people alive, you have to continue economic activities. Then you have to be reliant on companies. But of course, it's easier to say than done. According to Forbes, only 1 month into the war, Ukrainian employees working in Ukrainian private companies started to forget password. They just cannot remember passwords. Why? Because they are under the extreme stress and fear when their loved ones or their colleagues would be killed. And if you started to forget password only 1 month into the war, how can you secure cybersecurity? And there is no holiday or weekend in the war. And it's been over 2 years. So can you imagine that what kind of fatigue or stresses or fear the general public would suffer? So that is why to keep a good cybersecurity or security in general, I think there are other ways the Japanese should learn from the Ukrainians. And also, we should not forget that in a wartime, you have to counter not only cyber attacks, but also kinetic attacks and disinformation campaigns. So in a peacetime, companies have to deal with cyber attacks all the time, but not kinetic attacks. But in wartime, you have to also think about kinetic attacks. And in war or conflict, it is challenging to send cybersecurity team or professionals or experts to identify what is the cause and how you cannot just send new servers to recover. And for example, in summer 2013, according to Microsoft, Russians started to attack on Ukrainian agriculture in combination of cyber attacks, kinetic attacks, and also disinformation campaigns. So if your company is used to and familiarize themselves with how to do a better job in cybersecurity, but in a wartime, you have an extra workload to deal with also the kinetic and the disinformation campaigns. And like-minded countries have been observing lessons from the ongoing war. And the United States started to openly discuss how the potential crisis in the Taiwan Strait would see cyber attacks for disruptive purposes in the future. And I would say that the first one came in February 2023 from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So they annually publish threat assessment report. And they said that in the future crisis in Asia, China would launch disruptive cyber attacks against American homeland, critical infrastructure, and the military assets worldwide. Why? The Director of National Intelligence, the Office of the National Director of National Intelligence said that this aims to deter US military actions by impeding US decision-making, inducing societal panic, and interfering with the deployment of US forces. And the main targets would include oil and gas pipelines and rail systems. Do you remember that where the US Army cybersecurity professionals and American company cybersecurity professionals found Russian wiper malware in Ukraine before the aggression? Railway system. So I think that is part of the reason why they named this sector. And we saw a really alarming article from the Washington Post in December 2023. Actually, the hackers successfully breached a water facility in Hawaii, a major port on the West Coast, and oil and gas pipeline in the United States over the last year. So it means that it's already happening. And in January 2024, the US government revealed that they had disrupted hacking operations against communications, energy, transportations, and water. But the FBI also admitted that this cyber campaign was directed against not only the United States, but also other foreign victims. So if the crisis in the Taiwan Strait takes place, which countries would play a major role to play to support the United States? And which countries will be adjacent to the war zone or conflict zone? So that is why I would encourage Japan and also like-minded countries to pay attention to American reports, and also to started to implement lessons learned from the Ukrainians rather than just observing the lessons. And the Japanese government started to take some serious steps forward. So the Japanese government published the new national security strategy in December 2022. I think this is because they are urged by the war in Ukraine. And this national security strategy included a new concept called active cyber defense. And I know that active cyber defense means something different in every single organization and every single government. But in the Japanese case, it means that the increased intelligence capabilities to predict and also minimize potential cyber attack damages, and if possible, to prevent even a cyber attack from happening or making any damages if the Japanese government believes that that cyber attack would make serious consequences to the Japanese national security. And also the three documents on the national security included the new word called threat hunting. And do you remember that in my first 10 minutes of my presentation, I talked about the importance of threat hunting from the Ukrainians to help their national security and critical infrastructure operations resilient. And the Japanese government plans to increase the size of the SDF Cyber Defense Command up to 4,000 by Japanese fiscal year 2027. And also to expand the size and responsibility of the National Center of Incident Readiness and Strategy for Cybersecurity, or NISC. Japanese NISC is responsible for crafting the national cybersecurity strategy and policies and would serve as the main contact of international collaboration and also public-private partnerships. And the year of 2014 already has seen some progresses in terms of cybersecurity. So the Japanese government already submitted a new legislation draft on security clearance to expand to Japanese industry under the Economic Security Promotion Act in March 2024. And we expect that this draft will be passed in the current Diet session by this summer. Also, the self-defense forces has already increased the number of the cyber defense command to 2,230. And the NISC already doubled the size in April 2024. I mean, this month. So the Japanese government has been accelerating their cybersecurity efforts. But there is more room to expand for better cybersecurity capabilities. Because as we already learned from Ukrainians, long-term cyber defense build-up is key. And the Japanese government has been already doing the Economic Security Promotion Act related legislations, and probably next year the Japanese government would have to work on legislations on active cyber defense. But even before the new legislation is passed in the Japanese Diet, we can do a lot to expand public-private partnerships, to share intelligence on cyber attacks, and also share best practices, not within Japan, but also with like-minded countries, like Australians and the British and others. And also the international public-private cooperation is indispensable because, again, cybersecurity-related technologies and assets are all provided by the industry. So the industry can play a large role to share cyber threat insights And also, not only the global high-tech companies, but also critical infrastructure companies can collaborate with the government. They can also do exercises to test where different critical infrastructure sectors are intertwined or interdependent, like between the telecommunications, railway, transportations, electricity, and others. So this type of cross-sector exercises will be beneficial. And the Japanese self-defense forces have been already doing this kind of exercises with the US forces and also the Australian military to test multi-domain or cross-domain exercises to understand better about the full scope of conflict or war, including cybersecurity. But this kind of cybersecurity efforts cannot be done just by the military or civilian agency or companies. Because as I said in the beginning of my talk, every single person uses IT these days. It means that every one of us is responsible for cybersecurity, and every one of us is already empowered to contribute to economic security and national security through cybersecurity. So that is why I'm really encouraged to see so many people here today to listen to my talk and also to understand better about cybersecurity. With everybody's help, we can be a better and more secure for a better world. Thank you so much.